Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're talking about one of India's most notorious strongman politicians, a man who was somehow both a lawmaker and the law itself. This is the story of Mohammad Shahabuddin.
Okay, let's just start with the story that tells you everything you need to know. Picture this. It's the year 2000, and the entire government of a state is on a knife's edge. The solution? One man walks into a room with 2 pistols and a very simple message. This one act pretty much cemented his legend as the untouchable dawn of Bihar politics.
So, to really get our heads around how one man could wield this kind of power, we're going to break his story down into 6 parts. We'll go from his most brazen moments right to his eventual downfall.
Right. Let's start with that defining moment back in 2000, a time when the fate of the Bihar government rested in his hands and, well, literally at gunpoint. So here's the situation. The election ends in what's called a hung assembly. Basically, nobody won a clear majority. As you can see, Lalu Prasad Yadav's party, the RJD, had the most seats, but they were still way short of that magic number of 163. The other guys, the NDA, were right behind them. The whole thing came down to a bunch of smaller parties.
So how did the RJD bridge that gap? Well, this wasn't about fancy political negotiations or cutting deals. Their solution was brute force. And the man for that job? Shahabuddin. He allegedly just rounded up the legislators they needed, held them in a hotel, and made sure they voted the right way when the time came. Government formed. Simple as that.
Okay, so who was this guy? How do you get to a point where you can command that much fear and loyalty? To get that, we've got to go back to his beginnings and look at the wild contradictions that really defined him. And this just sums up the whole paradox of Mohammad Shahabuddin. On one hand, you have Dr. Shahabuddin, a man with a PhD in political science. Seriously. On the other hand, you have a guy who had his first criminal case at 19 and was officially labeled an A-grade history sheeter by the police. That's their term for an irredeemable criminal by the time he was 20.
And he played both sides of this coin perfectly. To his supporters back home in Sichuan, he was a kind of Robin Hood figure. He used his connections to get jobs for young people in the Gulf, turning his district into a hotspot for foreign money. But to his enemies, to anyone who got in his way, he was a ruthless killer, linked to dozens and dozens of murders.
So, and this is the crucial part, his criminal record wasn't some kind of roadblock to his political career. No, it was the launchpad. I mean, think about this. He won his very first election in 1990 while he was sitting in a jail cell. His reputation for being feared was actually his biggest political asset.
So as his political power exploded, first as a local legislator, then as a 4-time member of parliament, he basically turned his home district of Siwan into his own personal kingdom.
In Siwan, you see, Shahabuddin wasn't just another politician. He was the system. Everyone knew him as Sahib, the boss. He ran his own parallel court. People didn't go to the police or the actual courts with their problems. They went to him. And he would deliver his own form of instant and often very brutal justice. The real government? It was basically powerless there.
And this timeline, wow, it really shows you the sheer length of his reign. For almost 20 years, from that first win from jail in 1990 to his last win in 2004, he was politically untouchable, all while being protected by powerful state leaders like Lalu Prasad Yadav. But you can see right there, around the mid-2000s, things started to change. The convictions started piling up, and that was the beginning of the end.
But, when you have that much unchecked power, when you act like you're completely untouchable, eventually something's got to give. His reign was so absolute that parts of the system itself finally started to push back, and things got bloody.
And the thing about Shahabuddin, he wasn't subtle. He didn't just go after his rivals. He took on the state head-on. He's on record for attacking the convoy of a district police chief. He was the main suspect in the assassination of a really popular student leader who had the guts to challenge him. And in 2001, when police raided his home, it turned into an actual war zone. A massive gun battle that left cops and others dead.
He didn't just fight the system. He openly threatened to kill its top officials. After that huge 2001 police raid, he went on the record and publicly promised to hunt down the police superintendent who led it, Bachu Singh Meena, and kill him. This wasn't some backroom threat. It was a public declaration of war.
So, with dozens of cases against him, murder, extortion, you name it, you'd think a powerful rival or a top cop would be the one to finally bring him down. But no.
His downfall came because of the quiet, relentless courage of one ordinary man whose entire family he destroyed.
And this story is just horrifying. It all started when a shopkeeper named Chanda Babu refused to pay extortion money. As payback, his 3 sons were kidnapped. 2 of them, Girish and Satish, were murdered in the most brutal way imaginable, by being bathed in acid. The 3rd son, Rajiv, actually escaped and was the only witness. But just 3 days before he was supposed to go to court to testify, he was shot and killed too. The sheer horror of this crime, it shocked the whole country, and it became the one case that Shahabuddin could never, ever escape.
And for that very crime, he was eventually sent to prison for life. But get this, in 2016, he was briefly let out on bail. And what's his first move? A final, massive show of force. A convoy of 1,300 cars came to escort him from the jail. But that spectacle totally backfired. It got the Supreme Court's attention, they canceled his bail immediately, and they had him moved to Delhi's Tihar Jail, where he stayed for the rest of his life.
So, in 2021, Shahabuddin dies in prison from COVID-19. End of the story, right? Well, not exactly. His death left behind a really complicated legacy, and it raises a big question. Did his influence ever really go away? So after he was convicted and couldn't run for office anymore, his wife, Hina Shahab, ran for his seat. But look at this chart. She lost 3 times in a row. It kind of suggests that once you took away the element of fear, maybe that political support wasn't quite as rock solid as everyone thought. But, and this is a huge but, even with his death, and even with those election losses, the Shahabuddin name still carries incredible weight. After shunning them for a while, the very same RJD party formally welcomed his wife and son back into the fold in 2024. It's a clear sign that, in the wild world of Bihar politics, his family's influence is still a force to be reckoned with.
So what do we make of all this? The rise and fall of Mohammad Shahabuddin is an incredible story about one man, but it feels like it reflects something much bigger, doesn't it? It leaves you wondering, what does his story really tell us about the systems that let people like him thrive in the first place, and what really changes when they're finally gone?